Chris, thank you for having me, and thank you for putting on programs like this. I'm just going to dive right in and get started here without any further ado. And just to cut through some some definitions of the course, just so when people understand, you're going to see a lot of pictures later on. Once I get through a little bit of a description of the products that we're dealing with. There's so many different types of flooring products out there, but we're going to specifically be talking about laminate and SPC, and they're similar in a lot of ways. They're similar, they're carton goods, but they just have some different features. They could have different dimensions. I remember when laminate was really wide and then it went really thin to 3 1/4, and we were installing these, clicking these 3 1/4 inch boards together. The overall thickness was different from 6 millimeters in laminate up to 13, 2, 15. Edge style, we got square edge, we got beveled edge, we've got rounded pillow edge. I remember the days when the pattern and texture started coming out in laminate. Everything was smooth and flat. And they were able to put a texture to it. And then they were able to put registered embossed, where they match the texture to the print. The core material could be the same in these, different in these products. And we're going to talk about this later on, but the license mechanism. Some products have attached pads, some don't. But what are causing these claims? Why are we having all these problems? And a lot of it comes from unexpected performance issues that become evident after the installation. Now, is this because the product was oversold? Yeah, it could be. The flooring store, the point of sale, overselling it, selling it's bulletproof and it's not. It could be specified wrong. We could have residential products in commercial applications. So there's a lot of unexpected performance issues. We're going to talk about those later on in claims as well. The installation of the products that we're going to be talking about, no nail down, no glue downs. These products are primarily floated. Can they be glued down? Yes, they can. But what we're going to be talking about today is the primary function of floating the floor. What is a floating floor? A floating floor is connected at the edges, usually today by a glueless locking system, but we're still floating a lot of tongue and groove products, not anymore in laminate. Oh boy, I remember the days when laminate had a particle board core and I was sitting there on the job sites gluing the laminate and strapping them all together. And I haven't done that for a long time or seen that in a long time, but this is how we evolved in the business. So all floating floors require a flat and secure subfloor substrate. I'm going to emphasize this a little bit later on because a lot of our failures are because of this, and there's not a lot of attention put to this. All floating floors require a perimeter expansion space and cannot be affixed at any point. And that includes kitchen cabinets on top of floating floors, hardware on top of floating floors, closet tracks, that affixes floors in certain areas. So the floor has to be able to shift. It has to be able to move. I like to explain this as what we're creating is one big monolithic piece of flooring, whether it's SPC, MDF, wood, doesn't matter. We're creating one big monolithic piece that has to float in that room. We don't have a lot of tongue and groove left in the laminate and SPC world. So we have these locking mechanisms. They're usually licensed. There's only 3 or 4 or 5 or so major licensing profiles that we'll see on the market. But here's another key to the failures. They have different installation methods. The installer has to put them in a different method. And I've mentioned a few up here on the screen: angle, angle, angle drop, angle click, angle tap. And I see a lot of installers like, well, I know how to install laminate and this is the same. And then they start putting it in and they find that, well, geez, these end joints are not the same. They do not go together the same. So I think it's critical to know, and I'm sure there's manufacturers and distributors out there that are just going, oh, Drew, thank you for mentioning this, because you're butchering their product if you don't install it to their instructions or the method of that locking system has to be installed by. Common issues with both products. Again, we're going to get into this with some photos. We're going to get into this with a lot of discussion later on. So I don't want to spend a lot of time reading this slide to you, but on a floating floor, we could have gapping with the seams coming apart, buckling when it lifts off the substrate, chipping corners and edges, delamination, that's when the layers start coming apart, noisy floors when you walk on it. I'll bet you that's a big one out there. Deflection. Deflection is movement in the floor when you walk on it. And of course, manufacturers aren't perfect. Most of them will admit on occasion they'll make a mistake and they'll come to the table for that. Now, some issues that are specific to either laminate or SPC. SPC won't swell at the edges like laminate does. You get some raised and peaked corners that we get these complaints with laminate. Fractured cores, broken joints. I did write broken joints over to the SPC side, but SPC, we might get some curling, some edge lifting, end lifting. That's all some form of curling. Movement. And on the other slide, I talked about the noise. Now, I'd like everybody to take a really, really close look at this slide. You might even want to take a picture of it with your camera because I think this is the most important slide I teach in the inspection or the claims business. So when you go out on a claim, a lot of people who are not experienced, a sales rep, a dealer, even an installer, you're not experienced at investigating claims, you're more experienced at installing floors. And when you go out, yeah, manufacturer's looking to see if there's a defect in his product. I get that. But when you got to look at the broader picture, and on any floor when you have a complaint, is there a manufacturing defect? Let's rule that in or out. We're going to talk about this slide when I look at the pictures. Is there an installation problem here? Is it somehow related to the way it was installed? Site related, how it's maintained, how it's cleaned, how it's used, how it's abused. Maintenance is also humidity and temperature controlled, window coverings. Has the floor been correctly specified? This is when I blame architects for putting the wrong floor, the wrong type of installation into a building. It's very rare, but I flew out to New Jersey and I did 40,000 square foot hardwood claim in a university. And they floated the floor throughout the hallways in the cafeteria of this university. So I came off the elevator and I was walking on a floating floor, floating hardwood in a commercial that went on for about 200 feet. So I think that was incorrectly specified. Just one example. Laminate issues. So laminate issues, we can get into subfloor flatness. How do you measure subfloor flatness? How do you look for it? Yeah, the obvious subfloor flatness is you're going to feel underneath your feet when you walk on the floor. But that doesn't give you a measurement. But by placing a straight edge over the floor, and you can do this on the subfloor as well, without being on top of a finished floor. But by placing a straight edge, then you take this, you can measure it with a regular scale. I use these wedge-shaped taper gauges. They're both in metric and imperial. And you could see that we're almost at a ½ inch, we're over a ½ inch height here. And in this case, I would articulate the span as well, because if I'm out a ½ inch, all right, is a ½ inch a problem? Over 20 feet? I'm going to say no. Is ½ inch a problem over 20 inches? Yes. And then this is where you're going to find the floor moving or your concerned areas. When you're doing the straight edge, you might want to use 2 taper gauges, these little guys, and put them on either side of your level, your straight edge. I was talking to a rep this morning who was on his way to a claim, and he called me and he said, "Hey, Drew, what do I do?" I said, "Do you have a straight edge?" So what he's going to do is he's going to put 2 pieces of his product together. Doesn't matter if it's laminate or SPC, and you might want to put a 3rd piece in the middle. He's just created himself a straight edge. And these products are coming out of the box straight. So yes, he can use that because he wasn't really equipped for it. But subfloor flatness is critical. Whenever you do a subfloor flatness test over top of a floor, you are not testing the subfloor. You are getting a good indication on what is going on below the finished floor. So I'm going to suggest to you in most cases that that subfloor will be in worse condition than my measurement is on top, because the floor itself, it's floating, it's bridging the high spots. So it's actually making it less uneven than if I tore this floor up and was able to measure the subfloor itself. We can talk about this again later on. End gapping. End gapping is usually when the boards are sliding apart. A lot of people tend to get to these claims and they say it shrunk. Well, did it shrink? Measure the length of the board. If the manufacturer says the length of the board is supposed to be 1220 millimeters, see if the board's 1220. And I don't have enough time in this course here to teach everything about how to inspect for end gapping. So that's another course that Chris will be putting on, and I'll discuss it with Chris about how to inspect for these things. But is that a manufacturing defect? Is that a site-related defect or installation-related? And this is what we have to kind of go through in our minds on these claims, how to prevent it, what caused it. I mentioned in my list earlier on, lifting corners. Can the corner be pushed flat with your finger, or is it solid? I'll have a picture of a moving end joint coming up shortly. But on any laminate or SPCs, these manufactured parts are manufactured to the 10,000ths of an inch or more, where they should be almost perfectly flush with each other when they go together. So is this a damaged joint? Is it debris caught in the joint? Is it a manipulated joint by the installer? We don't know. Now, keep in mind this slide. Then we're going to go look at this slide. And what I have here is, if you notice the top left-hand corner of, yes, he did a stair step, this installer, and he wasn't working out of multiple cartons, because the top left corner of each of those end joints has a broken edge. So that's likely coming out of the box that way. And why didn't the installer see it? There's other things to eliminate too. Was that the leading edge of his installation where he was tapping, or is that the trailing edge of his installation? But my point was, each of those lifting ends are identical and in the same corner. And it's that's in the same corner. So I think it's unlikely it's site related. Here's a moving end joint where I could push on one end and it'd be flat, but I push on the other side of the joint, the left-hand side of your screen, the plank will go down. The right-hand side, when I push on it, it won't go down, it'll stay flat. When we get into some laminate, we get into some broken joints. I've got some really good pictures of some broken joints. And that's on the surface, you're going to be seeing something moving, something lifting, something not right. But if you have the opportunity to dissect the floor, I didn't even pull this apart, it was already apart. But we can see the fracture or the broken tongue. Why did the tongue break? Uneven subfloor, doubled up in a pad, manipulated or damaged by the installer. These are all things that have to get looked into in the investigation. Here's another example of a fractured core. Right at the joint, that could be causing a squeak, that could be causing issues. And again, finding that, it's not easy to find that, but you have to kind of think out of the box and keep digging into it. Here's another fractured core. You can get right underneath and see that the core is actually separating. This could be from handling and or mishandling. But if I bring your attention to this screen, and there's a fractured core in laminate, and the picture on the bottom has a scale, a steel ruler shoved in between a torn or a fractured core. This can be a manufacturing defect because I've seen this come out of the box that way. or it comes out of the box with a very, very small fracture, can't be seen by the installer, so we can't blame him. He installs it and the fracture continues to grow. And then it becomes a squeaking board or a moving board. Bubbling edges in laminate. This is swelling. And the key here, it'll only happen at the seams because primarily the center of the plank will be waterproof, but the seams are not waterproof on most laminate floors. I say most because we've got some waterproof products hitting the market now. Not water resistant, they'll still do this. But the key, what you're looking here, is the fact that the bubble is a mirror image over the seam. So it's happening on both sides over the seam. Here it's an end seam and a side seam. And now I'm going to bring you the $1 million picture. How about that for water damage? I don't even know why they had me out on this floor. If you can't figure this one out, you shouldn't be in the business, if I can say that. But this is the center core of the laminate swelling from moisture. And the moisture is migrating through the seam. And if you look closely at those pictures, you'll see the mirror image that I'm talking about. How where it's flat and where it's bubbled, it's doing it on both sides of the seam. Floors have to be floating. And this is SPC and laminate, but this is where somebody has taken a silicone sealant. And I might get into this later on, or if a question comes up, some instructions actually say to use a silicone sealant. I disagree with it, but how are we to disagree with manufacturer's instructions if that's how they want their product treated? But you'll also see in the lower right-hand part of that screen, that's the stair nose. It's actually not a stair, it is a stair nose, but that's actually a T-cap that is PL Premium. The PL Premium is sticking out where they've actually used PL Premium, which is a construction adhesive, not flexible, that is holding that laminate floor down from moving, and then they sealed along the other edge.
You can use your mouse, Drew, to point that out. Probably most people didn't see that there was PL 400.
Is my mouse on the screen now?
I think everybody sees that, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know that that would show up. Thanks, Chris. So here's the PL Premium. Sorry that some of the hair is caught in there. And here's your silicone sealant. Hardware stuck into the floor. Some of us seasoned inspectors out there have hundreds of pictures of door stoppers, closet tracks. This one here is that's your dishwasher. This is the side of the kitchen. And if I was to pull that screw out, it'll be about 1.25 inches going right into the subfloor. Because by code in Canada, a kitchen island that has plumbing and electrical, and here we have a dishwasher, so of course there's plumbing and electrical, the island has to be mounted down by code. And then you specify a floating floor. Well, it can be done, but how many installers? Is this the installer's fault? He probably put that floor in before the counter guy came along. So the installer didn't put this in. The installer probably didn't put this. This is a sliding closet door, barn door that slides. And here's hardware into the floor.
So Drew, those screws are supposed to just go into the material, the laminate material, not extend into the concrete below or whatever the subfloor is.
So I would not have an issue if the screw was a 1/4 inch, depending on the thickness of the laminate. If you got 13 millimeter laminate, you put a 1/4 inch screw in, you should be okay, because the screw's not going right to the laminate. The screw's sitting up higher. This is the incorrect screw to use for that bracket, but that doesn't matter. You're not seeing it. That is correct. If this screw comes out and it's longer than a 1/4 inch and goes all the way through, you've just screwed a floating floor down. Now, the other thing the installer can do, not in these applications, but for the closet track, is drill a hole that's larger than the screw. And then now the floor can float around that larger hole that you make. But some hardware, let's say you have a California shutter that's on a pivot. You can't do that because you don't want it to move. So again,
a lot easier with a 1/2 inch laminate, just to screw in 1/4 inch depth.
Yeah, but if the door is heavy enough, you can't, a 1/4 inch screw won't hold. You have to have it more. Have to have it more secure going right into the floor. So then you have to be creative about what are you going to use for, how are you going to make this floor float around this hardware? Screw the hardware into the wall, redesign this hardware so it slides between these guides, but it's screwed into the wall.
Bottom line is no pinch points.
You got it. So I'm just
would you agree, like if you're inspecting that, if you're a manufacturer's rep and you're called out to deal with the problems and you see that on the right-hand image, that if you just tap around that bracket, if it's not anchored to the concrete, it'll give you a hollow sound still. If it is anchored to the concrete, it'll be a much more of a thud or a solid sound.
I think that would be a good indication that you could use as a person. I wouldn't write that into the report because it turns into an opinion, or it's not a quantitative way of, I don't think it's destructive to get a Phillips screwdriver and take that screw out and put it back. If the screw doesn't come, I wouldn't force it as an inspector or claims person. So yes, you could knock on the floor and it might give you an indication, but if there's any inspectors on this call, I don't know if I would translate that to a report, because again, a lawyer could get you in court and say, you threw my client underneath the bus by knocking on the floor and listening to it. What training do you have? Where's the standard for that? And it would just go on and on. But it would be a good indication. But pulling that screw and laying it down and taking a picture of it next to a tape measure or a ruler, you've got it, right?
Yeah.
So I've talked about kitchens, and I actually have a picture where I pulled off the kick plate, which this one is just snaps on. It's not destructive. And they say it's not on the laminate floor, but I kind of think it is on the laminate floor.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And you could pull this, some of these come off, and you could see that it is on the subfloor, and the laminate just goes underneath the toe kick, which is acceptable. And again, these go on and on, these examples of mounting a floor to the subfloor. But I am keeping an eye on our time here. Okay, that was laminate. Moving on to SPC issues. There is no SPC issues. They're perfect and every installation works fine. Not happening. So cupping on a floor. When we got cupping, that the definition of cupping is when the edges are higher than the centers. You can easily just take a scale, put it across. I like to use the light in the background coming through. And what I say to guys, inspectors know this, measure this cup. Because if we come back in a couple of weeks, has the cupping gotten worse, or has it improved? Has it flattened? Does it change seasonally? And without a measurement, you don't know that it changes seasonally.
Just a question, that question that we talked about earlier on cupping, SPC, when we're told like this stuff doesn't expand or shrink from minus 40 Celsius up to plus 40 Celsius, how does it cup?
Okay, so it cups for many reasons. It is susceptible to temperature change, but it's also an installed plank. So the difference is if I took an uninstalled plank and put it through a gauntlet of tests in environmental chambers, it might stay flat and merely expand. But in an installed floor, if that wants to expand, I'm going to say 1 millimeter expansion could cause this much cupping. It's interesting. It doesn't take much to do that much cupping.
Would that be provided there's a pinch point?
Aha, you're onto something with that question. And I like this conversation. So it could be a pinch point. Great if you can find it and the floor is no longer floating. But let me throw an example at you, Chris, and we can have a conversation about this for our audience. This floor here, I believe this floor had a severe cup and then it tapered away. So the cupping was more severe. And as I moved away from the kitchen area where there was pinch points, it got flatter and flatter and flatter. And by the time I got over here or over here, there was no cupping.
And this cannot be a moisture issue.
No, it's not a moisture issue. But let's talk about a manufacturing defect. How can a manufacturer line up all these planks that he makes 50,000 square feet, but he's going to make, a manufacturer is going to make these planks line up in this customer's house and taper from a cupped condition down to flat. And a manufacturer can't do that. An installer didn't put it in this way, but it ended up this way. So now we're going to look at the investigation, the inspection, and go, okay, what did the installer do wrong to cause this? And I'm going to say if the installer does not install the floor properly, the manufacturer cannot warrant the floor. So an installer could void the homeowner's warranty just as much as the homeowner can void their warranties too for not maintaining the product as they're supposed to be. So what did the installer do wrong here? We can find pinch points. We can do that. What did the homeowner do wrong here? Well, did he maintain his house properly? SPC is pretty rugged to moisture, so I don't put any emphasis on moisture.
The steam cleaner do something like that?
A steam cleaner can affect the dimensional stability, but I'm going to suggest that the steam cleaner won't put that much heat penetrated through the floor unless you hold it in place for a long period of time. So it wouldn't do a large area like this. Sunlight hitting the floor might on a floor that's pinned or has pinch points. Okay, let's move on. We can come back to any questions at the end of the program if somebody has questions on any of these topics that I bring up.
Yeah.
But we're halfway through and I want to get to questions at the end. End gapping. Yes, this is an SPC floor that has gapped apart. So that's quite the gap going on there. Again, to do an end gapping complaint, I actually threw in a slide on how to do it. These planks, we measure the length of a plank, and then we measure the length of the plank. Here it's 4 foot. We won't use millimeters because it's easier just to look at this. Each plank is 4 feet long. Where there's no gaps, I have 8 feet. Where I have a gap, 2 planks is 8 foot and a quarter. So how did the manufacturer cause that gap? The boards have slid open. Why did they slide open? What's pinching the floor? Or can you believe it or not, subfloor irregularities can cause these boards to come apart as well. But to do a gapping, any gapping inspection, you need multiple plank widths or lengths across the gaps. And for manufacturers on the call, this is how to determine that there's no manufacturing issue with your product. Broken joint. Topically in the floor, do I know that there's a broken joint? No. Do I know it's moving? Yes, because it starts off at an even plane. And as I push down, I create a vertical offset. Destructive testing or some way to get your instruments in there to pull that apart to see if the broken joint is there. Why did that joint break? Is it manipulated by the installer? Probably not in the middle of the floor like this one. Is there a soft spot or a low spot in the subfloor that could cause deflection and then walking across it? And we're going to talk about these joints on these SPC products. They are very, very brittle.
See some manufacturers' guidelines that say tap the planks together, like with a mallet, rubber mallet.
Yes, I've seen that.
And
I
some
don't agree with it.
no, it'd be crazy to do that. But I saw one set of guidelines that said use a block to spread the load of that.
Yeah, that's our standard tapping block that we're familiar with in the laminate business and SPC. And you're actually on the edge of the plank, not on the edge of the click system. So you're not doing any physical damage to the licensed locking system. Yeah. And with these this broken joint, I mean, it could be dozens of reasons. It could be debris caught in there. It could be a point load that occurred after installation. It could be not engaged properly and then broke afterwards. So again, there's lots of reasons for this. How soon after? Did it go together fine and was the floor okay for an entire year before this broke? Or
2 layers of underlay.
Too much underlayment. I've seen that as well. I got a picture coming up of that. So let's move on, Chris, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Another broken joint. This one's just a little bit more severe and a little bit more obvious. You can see back here where it's completely missing. I pushed down on it and there's movement. This one had too much excessive pad. This one had pad when it shouldn't have had pad, basically. Here's a subfloor imperfection. So yes, they put SPC over a screw in the floor and it was started breaking. And there's other pictures that I have on this claim where it was just starting to fracture. And I put my magnet over it and I found that there was a fastener underneath. So basically this is this when I lifted up to see what was underneath. So this SPC, they do not like subfloor imperfections. You can even see here at the seam, how that seam is higher than this seam, causing a problem there with a subfloor imperfection. Look at this picture. Here's a vinyl floor. There's your subfloor. Yes, that's carpet. Here's the carpet coming through the joint. How does that manufacturer expect their product to perform over carpet? It doesn't. There are no instructions. I shouldn't say that until I read my next instructions. You should not be installing a floating floor, laminate or SPC or virgin vinyl over any carpeted floor. But yes, I got called. And again, I don't know why the sales rep couldn't figure this one out. But anyways, I like the business. Okay, now I'm kind of saving this towards the end of the program here before we get into questions. And I'm really liking your timing here because I'm probably going to talk about 5 minutes on these broken end joints. And then Chris, if you can get prepared for questions that you have yourself or from the group, that'll be fine. This is a very, very common complaint we see. I'd be surprised if there's anybody on this call that has never seen or heard of this type of complaint with SPC. And there's all sorts of speculation out there. What is causing this? It's not an easy one to put your finger on. I get that. Do we blame the installer? Well, that's nice and easy to say, yeah, the installer broke that end joint. I'm going to show you a few pictures before I get into discussion. This is the same end joint lifting up at the end as this one back here. And another view of this going on. Now, why is this happening? What's going on here? If we take a look at this and we actually measure where that fracture point is, you'll notice that fracture point, you can see the fracture point here, and it's a straight line across here, that is the overlap ledge of the joint, where about here on, it's the full thickness of the plank. So what this is doing, so we have this, which is barely even gapping, and it's broken, but we have one here that is gapping because this plank is sliding back, is moving because of subfloor, because of pinch points, and this joint is riding up and over the groove. So if one is the tongue and one is the groove, I like to call it an underlap and overlap, kind of like how a knuckle of a train comes together and you have that hooking action. And the overlap plank, this one, not this one, will always get that fracture on the one end. This one will not do it because you have full thickness vinyl SPC up to this point and up to this point, but this is riding up and over. But why is it breaking? It is breaking because, and a very well-respected colleague of mine in the business shared this slide with me. I'm very impressed with it. He's a very well-respected inspector in Vancouver. We have 1 millimeter of brittle material right here. This is where it's breaking, either at the weakest point or right here, where the full thickness of the SPC continues. So as this moves or shrinks back, or even deflection in the subfloor, we have this breakage at approximately 4 to 5 millimeters. It's anywhere in here where the line of fracture will occur. And that's what you're seeing right there topically when this is the side profile. And this is it riding up and over in mat. Now, why is this happening? How do we prevent it? Who's causing it? This is where I'm going to get into the product is just not designed to perform as well as it's said to perform in the business. So we're installing these products. Installers are coming along and smacking the top. Now, some manufacturers say hit it. Some manufacturers say don't hit it. So is the hitting action causing the problem? Yes. Here's a pad. So we have some sort of movement on the bottom here. But I'm going to suggest to you, let me just give you a talk about deflection for a minute. All wood subfloors have deflection, have some sort of movement. Engineered, it's going to happen. A concrete subfloor is not going to have any deflection or movement. If you've ever slipped and fell on concrete, you know it didn't move. So when we have this deflection, I'll give you an example of the building code across Canada is very, very similar. There might be some areas, Quebec is a little different. They want to be different. So you can smile at that one. Sometimes they're different because they're better. They're a little bit stronger and more conservative. But if we have an L360, which is the standard deflection of a wood subfloor in a residential home, L360 over a 10-foot span allows 1/3 of an inch deflection. On a 20-foot span, it allows over 1/2 an inch of deflection. Now, it still holds the load, but that's movement. So for some of you in the business, manufacturers, distributors, dealers, large installation outfits, I'm going to suggest to you, you probably have less claims on concrete floors than you do on wood floors. I'm not saying you have no claims on your concrete, but you have less because there's no deflection. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'll probably get people that agree with me and some that don't, but I don't think that this profile, 1 millimeter thickness of a product as brittle as SPC is designed to be going over a floor that has deflection. These products are also not designed for rolling loads and point loads. And a point load is when you're going to get a certain amount of pounds per square inch at one point. If you've installed this in a kitchen and a chair hits right here, that could break. If a chair hits right here, this is going to go down, this under portion is going to go down, and you can't predict where that chair leg is going to land and damage this joint. So it's very interesting that it's the product that's causing our failures when we're blaming the installer, we're blaming the homeowner, and yet are our manufacturers, are they going to add a couple more millimeters to this? I don't think so. SPC flooring comes anywhere from about, I'm going to say 3.2 millimeter to 7 millimeters thick. There might be some a little thicker, not including the pad. And our standard is about a 4 to 5 millimeter product. And when you get this much material, it doesn't work over a wood floor. Did I just say that, Chris? It doesn't work over a wood floor?
Well, it's very questionable. I agree.
Yes, it's questionable. And it's something that we have to go back to the research and development department and see what we can find. And this is why the laminates work, because they're not as brittle as the SPCs to be breaking at the joints.
Yeah. And they won't add thickness because a little bit of thickness adds a whole lot of weight.
And it would strengthen this joint.
Yeah.
So
but I think the important thing there is that you mentioned is the brittle aspect. It's like it's as strong and as weak as glass, and it's supposed to be used as a flooring product. That's
a good example of comparing it to glass. So we are installing glass, and when you install it and walk away, you'll have a nice floor. But when the homeowners start dancing on their floors, glass will break.
Yeah.
So I didn't talk about SPC, what the definition is, because Some call it a stone plastic composite, some call it a stone polymer composite. I've even heard stone polymer core. To me, it's all kind of the same thing. We started off using about 60% stone, and then we've backed it to less stone, more polymers. They are getting a little bit better. But I think our new core products coming out, some of these super cores are going to be in the laminate category, are going to overcome a lot of these problems.
That's good news. On the subject of flatness, like most installation guidelines call for 3/16 over 10 feet, which we equate to 1/8 of an inch over 6 feet. Is that good enough for that product, do you think?
I think it's good enough if you can get there, but 3/16 within your 10-foot span, so 3/16 over 3 feet, such as a peaking end joint of OSB, that's going to cause a problem. So if we take an SPC, and I love giving this example to people, if we take our SPC floors, install them on a granite countertop, so a granite countertop having zero deflection and perfectly flat, I'm going to suggest that this SPC will work quite well. And it will do as it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
But as soon as we put it on a wood subfloor that has deflection, and I think there's a whole group of people out there that say, but Drew, there's no such thing as a subfloor that flat.
There's a couple of things that need to be brought up about your deflection and the tolerance levels that you're currently just talking about. The first issue is that when you read most manufacturers' specifications, they give those exact specs of 3/16, 1/8 over span of whatever feet.
Yeah.
The problem is this: the normal problems that we're starting to see today is a squeaking sound, a noise sound. And the problem is that no manufacturer is making any statements in their warranties that your tolerance levels will help with that noise. And they don't even say why that floor flatness is there. Basically, it's joint integrity. Noise has nothing to do with it. So when we go out and do inspections, we go out and do claims, and it's within that tolerance level that the manufacturers have given, the end user's looking at us going, it's making a noise that's not acceptable. And we're sitting there saying, sorry, but it's within tolerance. Bottom line is movement is friction, friction is noise.
Yes.
And if you're going to have that deflection, you're going to have noise, but it needs to be put into the specs so that we as reps, when we're going out and doing inspections, can open it up and go, it clearly says in here that if there's any movements and if there's any noise, that's not part of warranty, because too many manufacturers are not including that in their warranty.
You've mentioned everything you say. I agree with you 100% that noise is movement. I have to repeat this for people to really take home. What you said is critically important. You can't get noise out of a floor if there's no movement. It's caused by walking across the floor. You're absolutely right. What two parts are moving? What's failing? So you're on to that. That is correct.
Well, and why this scenario repeats is, I'll put it out there that you've got a product that is being driven down and down and down in price, just like laminate was over the course of years, and yet subfloor work is a product essentially that's going up in price, and the two don't jive. Like Mrs. Jones, who's buying her cheap SPC floor or laminate floor for $1.50 a foot, does not want to spend $4 a square foot fixing the subfloor. It doesn't add up. So then the installer is put under the pressure of, nope, I don't want any subfloor work done. Just install the floor.
Yeah.
And there's the repeat. Yeah. That's why.
But we all like to blame the installer and say, well, you shouldn't have installed this floor. Well, he's given the task. I mean, let's look at reality now, not what the book says, but the installer set up for failure. The subfloors need to be flat. Manufacturers recognize that their product will be successful over a flat, secure subfloor. And it will be. But what's the reality in subfloors? So this goes back to the specifying stage. Going, if you're just going to use a bunch of board whackers that are just going to install this product over this OSB floor and zero respect for subfloor flatness, perhaps you should be looking at a different product if you want this product to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I like that comment from that other caller. That's a very good comment. That
right on point.
Is movement, or something broken, something moving. Why is it moving? Subfloor flatness, pinch points, all sorts of reasons why it could be moving. So any other questions, Chris?
Yeah, some questions coming in. Clayton, in the SPC photo, where the link is only 1 millimeter, subfloor deviations within tolerance is also to be considered in the equation. So,
Yes. Yes.
basically reiterating what we're
So
saying.
it's not just subfloor flatness. There could be other issues causing that to lift and separate.
Yeah.
But that's what when we're seeing my point about this, and I have to limit my subject category to a 1 hour call with all this stuff. If we did a 1 day course on this, we could talk about it a little bit further. But what I'm trying to show is a lot of callers that see this, that don't know what it is, where the fracture point is, where that fracture point is happening and why. But there's all sorts of reasons why the overlap plank can move back. So Clayton's right. It's not always subfloor. It could be pinch points. It could be, Clayton and I, we've both seen where a pad has a nap to it. A nap meaning kind of like your golf course greens or carpet has a nap. And every time it's walked on, it'll be pushed this way, but can't be pushed back. It's like pushing into Velcro.
Yeah,
It can go one
creeps.
way, but not the other way. And then it walks apart. So then the manufacturer changes their pad and the product works again.
That's why they're putting a 1 mil dense black pad attached.
I love the dense pad. We need a pad underneath most floating floors. We need that. But the denser the pad, the better. You get into that cheap foam, open cell foam. No. And manufacturers don't specify enough in their instructions. Oh, did I just say that? When it comes to pad, they might say something like 3 millimeter maximum. Well, that's just the thickness. Why don't they talk about compression strength? Why don't they talk about the compressiveness of the pad? So if the installer or dealer or specifier or builder wants to put out your cheap 3 millimeter pad, they've met the requirements in that instructions, but they're going to cause a problem for the homeowner.
That's
Use
right.
a 3 millimeter dense pad. They're super expensive.
They don't recommend the pad mainly because they also have their own pad that they want you to use.
Yes, but sometimes their own pad was developed for another product and it's not working anymore. That is correct as well.
Well, when there's ambiguity in the specs, when they just say 3 mil pad, and that could be as soft or as hard as you, whatever.
Correct. Correct.
That's when you get a 1/8/6 undulation in the surface, which is within tolerance. And then in combination with that soft pad, now you've met all your manufacturer's guidelines, but you're still experiencing a failure.
It's the recipe. It's everything added up. So,
Yeah.
Any more questions coming in?
Please also note we have 2 hands up.
Yes, who we got? Alex Pearson. Ask away if you've still got a question.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I mean, you guys actually answered a bunch of it. I was going to comment that, if you look at the picture you're showing right now, a huge part of what we see is the pad is becoming the issue. So, the standard for vinyl flooring in general is maximum 1.5 millimeters, and then a compressive strength of 35 pounds. But again, as you mentioned, no one talks about compression strength. They all talk about density.
But you do. You're smart enough to know. Let's talk about not only the overall thickness. Let's put in the compression strength.
We've been making the stuff for a few decades.
Call,
so
you just learned something that you didn't know before about pad.
Well, what I was going to say is I love the point about wood floors adding to the deflection. I think that definitely is a piece of it. But I just wanted to also, talk to people out there too, that there's a huge push right now for sound ratings. Right. And we've all dealt with it. Double up pad. I mean, whatever the Strata wants, a 95. I've never seen a real product that can do that, but hey, sure, that's your number. But here's the thing. Pads block sound when they're less dense. So you have 2 opposing desires in the market. One is for less sound, but the other is that the product doesn't fall apart. So just be careful with the products that you're purchasing, because if the sound ratings go too high, but they're not talking about the compressive strength in the pad, you have one of them is giving way likely.
So if I understand you correct, and I agree with everything that you said there, and I thank you for your input, but is this a case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing when they have an IIC rating, a sound class transmission rating to achieve, and then they want this product as the floor covering? They have to create the formula where they both work together. Is that what you're saying, Alex?
Yeah, it's a matter of you get what you pay for. So there are products out there. There are manufacturers that can make good sound ratings and also have high compressive pads. But as you pointed out, they're not likely sold. Yeah, they're not likely sold at Home Depot. You know, you have to pay for it if that's what you want. But I always tell our customers, this is like tires. You know, the underpad's like the tires on your car. If you're going to buy a Ferrari and then you're going to stick the world's cheapest tires on it, your performance is going to be heavily compromised because of that. So
Agree.
Yeah,
exactly. Nice comment. Thanks for that, Alex.
Emily Alabashev.
Hi, thank you very much. I actually don't have a question, but I guess it's more that I protect my install. So we are a dealer, and the question that I have is, all of the information, say that we actually listed and provide to the client and they refuse. For example, putting SPC on top of subfloor, the client doesn't want it to fix. Say that we inform them, there's email documentation. Can that customer come back and say, nope, they didn't tell us, and do go to sue us?
So do I understand you correctly that you're telling them to do it properly, but they don't want to do it properly?
They don't want it. That is our biggest issue that we have in our service, especially with the retail side, where clients refuse. They don't want to pay the extra bucks.
Well, I don't think you can be responsible.
So majority of the time we back out on the projects because we don't want to go through because it's being unprofessionally done. We do inform them to go their own way and try to find
smarter. You're probably making more money backing out than you are going in knowing that there's going to be a failure and a problem, because most of us, well, I do and Clayton does, but most of us don't get paid for claims and problems that you have to fix afterwards. I think that's prudent of you to do what you're doing and go in there and say these are the parameters, these are the musts to make this work. And if they don't do it, which that's causing a lot of our problems. And us inspectors, we're going out there and we're finding these failures are based on what's not being done in the business.
Emily, you're right. You can be successfully sued if you, as the skilled and professional trade, do the wrong thing, whether you're told to or not. Ultimately, if that case ends up in front of a judge who knows absolutely nothing about construction, let alone flooring, we'll just go to what's called specific performance, which is just what is written in black and white. And that will be installation guidelines.
I summarize this as a flooring system. So Emily, I thank you for your input, and you are correct in what you're doing. But any flooring system, a glue down of hardwood has a whole set of products, a floating floor with a pad and a proper subfloor, a nail down product, right fasteners, right schedule, right nailing gun. And there's new products coming out or different products that require a specialty fastener that most guys don't carry on their trucks. Well, you can't go against that grain. So now we're going to come in with this product like SPCs. And I'm just going to suggest to you that these SPCs, they love flat subfloors. They do not like unflat, uneven subfloors. So let's move on to some other questions. Did we answer your question, Emily? Is that okay?
Yes, that is. No, I just needed the validation for it, to be honest. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
C. French.
Colin.
Hey, Drew. Just wanted you to touch on something that we see quite a bit, and that's people adding additional layers of pad under SPC to try to improve and enhance the sound performance.
Okay, so we've kind of discussed that in a roundabout way, but to bring it all together for your question, Colin, thank you for chiming in with that, because that is a big problem out there. And some of my slides that I showed, like the carpet underneath, that's like having a triple pad underneath a floating floor. the brown color floor with the broken joint with my finger pushing on had excessive pad underneath that shouldn't have. So what Colin's trying to say is mainly in condominiums, because houses don't generally call for an impact insulation class soundproofing barrier, but condos do. Because when you live below, you don't want to hear the guy upstairs walking around or their kids playing with the toys on a hard surface floor. So these condos, they ask for an IIC rating. Most of the times it's around 72. Sometimes they can go up to 85. Alex, the previous caller, was saying something about a 92, 95. And to get these impact insulation classes, you do need a thicker pad. But it's up to the specifier to work with the manufacturer of the product to make sure that the complete system works. So, Colin, I'll let you get a chance to chime in after I make this comment, but if somebody wants to put in 6 millimeter 1/4 inch cork and then put your product on it, or that dense rubber, you will get your insulation class from that dense rubber, which weighs a ton if you've ever carried that up to a condo, or cork. And then it'll still be a sturdy subfloor with very little deflection for these products. But that is a problem when somebody goes in and puts too thick and too much deflection in their pad for their sound ratings.
Yeah, there's also a belief that if you put 2 layers of 70 IIC down together, that you'll get 140 IIC.
No, it doesn't work that way.
You do not.
Okay, we got some more hands up.
John Rams, thanks for the question. Mr. French, Colin French, John Ramsey.
That's Jason Ramsey, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jason Ramsey.
That can be John, that's fine.
Yeah.
Hey, Drew, thanks for everything. Listen, this notion that moisture is not affecting the SPC products, I feel is maybe not quite true, especially with, having to put 6 mil poly over the concrete substrates. What are your thoughts on that? And then more importantly, some of these SPCs are just really like limestone or chalk.
I don't think moisture is a huge culprit to these floors, but what the moisture does for temperature and what the moisture does as creating an imbalance. So I left this slide up, which is actually a brilliant slide for this topic on moisture. So let's say we got this on a concrete subfloor. Where's the moisture going to escape? Right here. Not through the pad, but through this joint right here. When the pad's attached, it's not a continuous break. So it's what the moisture does to the temperature and the stability of the product. Some SPC, some vinyl floors are affected by moisture. Some, I'm going to suggest, are completely waterproof. You can put this around your pool deck and the moisture won't affect the product. So there are differences in some products out there.
Is that due to the stability layer or lacking thereof?
Yeah, and the temperature change, or like I said, the key words, creating an imbalance. So creating something at the joint that is not down the rest of the plank.
So is that why now most of these manufacturers, and they weren't 2 years ago, but we're seeing more now over a concrete substrate to incorporate that 6 mil poly?
Yeah, and that's up to that manufacturer if they want to warrant that. Do I have an issue of that? No. Because laminate, we kind of have to put that down there. But on an SPC, if the manufacturer requests it, it has to be down there for their warranties. What's the science behind it? I don't see the logic behind 6 mil poly. For those people on the call, 6 mil poly is a vapor barrier. It stops moisture. Anything less than 6 mil is a moisture retarder.
Okay. That's right. So as a contractor, we've been doing it for about 8 years, incorporating 6 mil under the SPCs, even before the manufacturers, just because of the logic from laminate. And thankfully, we haven't had any issues. But I see it all the time. Guys aren't incorporating that, and those products are failing because of moisture.
Yeah, but the question is, we would take a little bit of an investigation to say, is it because of the lack of poly? I don't see any problem with putting the poly down. It's not cheap. It's not fun to work with if you're the guy working with it. But is it an improvement? Is it an extra step for the homeowner? I would say it is. But
Okay.
um,
Yeah, because we're seeing a huge problem with that here in California. It's everywhere. These products are failing and they don't rear their ugly heads until maybe 12, 24 months later.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
The implied
right.
warranties in California are done.
And before we run out of time, and this is an interesting that I use it on this on your question here, Jason. What manufacturers are out there testing their products? What associations or labs are out there testing these products? Very, very little compared to our other flooring products that we have out there: carpet, hardwood, laminate. We have all sorts of testing labs. We have all sorts of ASTM testing methods, standards. We don't on this vinyl. So there's very, very little testing in the industry other than what we're seeing in real life. So this is your panel of experts right here looking at all the testing. And your example there, Jason, on, well, you put a poly under and you have less problems. Well, that's thank you for bringing that up, because let everybody else know that too. Maybe they can incorporate the same strategy you've used and minimize their issues.
Yeah, definitely. If you're putting it over concrete, you got to incorporate it, whether you're testing or not.
And whether the instructions included or not. I agree. Yeah.
I say if in doubt, especially slab on grade, use 6 mil poly, period.
Correct. All right, great. Thanks, Drew.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
Have you ever had any issues with SPC hybrid laid on concrete floors with over 75% RH within the slab? Unlikely.
Yeah, I was going to say I haven't seen it because we're talking about a product here that's very, very highly resistant to moisture. I'm not saying it can't cause any issues. I don't want to be that guy going on record saying it won't. But I would agree with you, unlikely. Any more questions before we run out of time, Chris?
Is Drew open to further training? It's going to put you on the spot, buddy. Is Drew open to further training sessions? I would be interested in talking more. I think.
Okay. Yes. Stay tuned. This show is not about me. It's about you. But I will be taking some claims training, inspector training across Canada to the big cities of Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. I don't know about Montreal, but Toronto area. So yes, claims training will be available across Canada coming up.
One frustrated manufacturer says, I am fed up with hearing we did not do it as per your instruction standards because the homeowner did not want to pay for the floor to be done right. Then the shop expects us, the manufacturer, to fix the floor or supply the material for free. Yeah, around and around it goes. You know,
yeah, around and around it goes. And if your instructions are written properly, that should be a document to get you out of most of your claims.
I mean, if I'm a flooring contractor and I know I'm going to get shut down, you're not having an extra material, we're not supporting you if you do it wrong, I'm probably going to think twice about saying yes to Mrs. Jones to putting it over a non-flat substrate, for example.
Well, think on the side of lawyers and think of everybody coming to the table. So let's say we have a flooring failure, and this goes for any flooring at all. In Mrs. Smith's house, flooring fails. Everybody comes to the table. When I say everybody, I'm talking everybody involved, any stakeholder, the installer, the manufacturer, the dealer, the person who sold it to them, the distributor, and everybody's got a lawyer behind them. And there's inspectors at the table. So if you didn't do anything wrong, if that installer put it in by the instructions, according to industry standard, if it's something like a hardwood floor, carpet has industry standards, laminate has industry standards and instructions, that installer gets to go home. If that homeowner maintains their house perfectly by the book, they get to go home. No, they're already at home. Now the manufacturer, if you've got no defects, no proven defects, you get to go home. So we figure out what went wrong. And the last guy at the table usually owns the floor. Is that a way does that kind of summarize managing a claim? And you don't want to be that guy. And I think installers have to, kind of start doing it more and more by the book and not by, well, this is what my boss told me, or this is what I'm told to do.
On that note, I'd like to bring up what was just brought up about using the poly. While I agree with that over any concrete, let's keep in mind that some inspectors do go out on sites, and when they find that an installer didn't follow specifications to the letter, will fail the installation. Now, that might not be the cause of what went wrong, but it gives the inspector cause to fail the installation. Keep that in mind.
I don't know who that is that said it, but I love your comment, and that is absolutely correct. I'm going to suggest to you right now, and if you hire a good inspector, no, they're not going to do that, because it's too
Correct.
easy for some of these other inspectors and I don't want to go down this road. So, Chris, cut my slot. I won't be that guy. Anybody that I train and certify won't be that guy either.
And neither will
You
I.
have to go in as an inspector, find the cause, and put your hanging your hat on there going, well, there's an island on top of the floor. So how come you didn't mention that in your report? I said, yes, it's wrong to have that island, but it's not causing the issue. Why is it happening in the bedroom? Shut up. Forget about the island anymore, even though it's in the photo. Stop looking for escapes. We have a problem that's over here. One transition.
Drew, what do you think? There's about 60 inspectors in Canada, 600 in North America, maybe more?
I don't even know the count, but if you want to go with 60, I think that's a reasonable number, plus or minus. The question is, like anybody else that's certified in what they do, lawyers, accountants, my dentist, my doctor, they're all have a governing body and had to pass tests. But inspectors have to do this as well. And not all inspectors are experienced. Some inspectors are trained not to give a conclusion in a report and to provide facts to get them out. And I disagree with that. Don't bring in an inspector. That could be the sale guy, the manufacturer sales rep's job, because that's his job to look after his own product, but not when you bring in an independent.
And NFCA assigns files all the time across the country to inspectors. We're very selective. There's good, better, best, and everything in life, and inspectors are no different. The motto is what's right, not who's right. That's what you do when you inspect. So
for that caller that just came in and said there's some inspectors throwing installers underneath the bus, I'm going to go on record right now saying to I don't care if 1,000 people watch this video after the fact, I don't think there's any flooring installation that's done 100% by the book, especially in new home construction. So is there a subfloor that flat? Are there conditions that perfect? No, but we have to find out what caused the issue. We can't just go in and say, well, this is wrong. So that's right.
I agree. That's why I brought it up.
So I thank you for bringing that up, because I don't know if you heard my voice. I was kind of passionate about that.
That's why you got to be very careful when you add recommendations to a report. Oh my God, then you're going to go into some deep.
They do, and because I teach other inspectors, I'm often the second or third inspector on some of these claims. And why am I the second guy? What happened to the first two? Why couldn't they get it?
Right.
It's an interesting business out there. And I like to hone in and find the smoking gun and what's wrong. And the inspectors that I teach, the inspectors that are cream of the crop, Chris, you know who some of them are. There's probably some on this call. Find the cause, not just something that you see that's not right.
Yeah. Comment, in Australia, we demand plastic sheeting over chipboard or particle board to stop the board gripping the back of the pad and causing issues.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
Interesting. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I'd never do that.
But that's interesting. Thank you for that comment. Next.
Let's see, what do we got? Some large inspection organizations have a strong financial interest in keeping their few big clients happy, back to what we were just talking about. As a manufacturer, we want data to back up the cause, not just speculation or accusations. Absolutely. No opinions, please. Only facts.
Oh, I don't like when I read an inspection report and the conclusion starts off with, in my professional opinion, I believe. No, the facts obtained in this inspection lead to this conclusion.
Exactly, yeah. Ron Ellsworth, how do us inspectors get on your referral list to become members? Well, just send us an email to info@nfca.ca and we'll talk. There is no perfect installer or person, so the manufacturer has to create a product that has zero tolerance for errors. Ooh.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think the manufacturer allows for it. That's why we say 3/16 over 10 feet.
Actually, Clayton corrected himself, just if you scroll down.
Oh, is that right? Whoops. Yeah, he says.
Well, if that's Clayton asking the question, we can move on to the next, Chris. No, I'm just kidding.
He says, whoops, the manufacturer has to create a product that does not require zero tolerance for errors. There's got to be some give, right? It's,
well,
construction sites.
Clayton's onto something. Let's just discuss this, what he's onto. There are parameters, there are allowances, there are variations. So manufacturers, I think they have to develop a product that's responsible and that's going to work. And they have to tell the installer how to install it properly to make it work. And when we bring out a new product, let me talk about bamboo. I know it's still out there. There's 2 big companies that still do bamboo, but why don't we use it anymore? To me, in my eyes, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work in Canada. So we tried it, we brought it in. You try nailing down bamboo and you can't get it to work without dimpling, without problems. So yeah. It goes out. There's all sorts of different engineering platforms. When I talk about a platform, I'm talking about the style of engineered wood flooring that we bring in. And there's products that are coming in right now that I think will not be here after they realize, they're not as good as we thought. Is SPC one of them? So keep your eyes wide open at the beginning of next year for these new platforms, these new cores that'll be in these laminate products. They're called super cores, and they're truly going to be waterproof. Now, how they're going to perform long term, I don't know. But we're trying to close some gaps to give these products at a good price point, functional, that value to the person's home, durable, and of course the looks. We can do that now with all our printing technology that we have. But keep an eye on some of these new products.
Improved. Well, we like to think we're getting better in the industry, so maybe that will be the case when those products come out. One last thing, one last comment for you, Drew, before we let you go, and I think it's an excellent one to finish on, considering the slide that is up and how many people have to face that broken end joint, which just drives us crazy. Clayton says a 3mm 3-in-1 premium cushion designed for laminate and engineered hardwood typically has a compressive strength of about 9 psi, pounds per square inch. SPC needs about 45 psi or higher and should be a maximum of 1 millimeter thick. That will help a lot of people be clear and about this subject.
Yes, and that's very good. Those numbers that he said, I agree with. Most laminate companies back in the day required 7 psi as a minimum thing, so 9 is about an average. I do have a pad here in my office that is 1 millimeter thick and gives an IIC rating of 72. Now, that's written on the product. I haven't tested that. So can you get an IIC in the 70s with 1 millimeter? Well, this claims that it's there.
It's so subjective. I mean, the IIC.
Very hard to test. Very hard to test.
Is it tested with according to an ASTM? And how thick was the concrete? These products don't come tested on their own and deliver IICs.
Well, the thing is, every building would be different in itself. So the thickness of the subfloor, is it hollow core? What type of concrete?
That's why the IIC system is kind of moot. It doesn't really mean anything because you're trying to give it to Mrs. Jones, who has a building design nothing like the product was tested under in the lab. So it's very misleading.
But if the specifier comes in and say, okay, they want an IIC of 72, and I have it right here. The product claims it's 72, I can install it. You
yes.
It.
Yes,
think that's-
literally, I totally agree with that. Just literally, all you want is to supply a 72i IC, and there's no mention of an ASTM. Fill your boots. You can do what you can. Absolutely, yeah. That's the power of the specific performance, black and white. What is actually being said?
Yeah,
and then you can go do that.
So Drew, I just had a quick question. So you mentioned a little bit ago about using a cork underlayment. What is going to be the difference between that and a regular underlayment, besides obviously it being a little more harder than a regular typical underlayment?
Well, that's why I mentioned it as an example. I was just contemplating when you started your question if I should deny saying that, but no, I won't. I use the example of cork or rubber because it's very, very dense. It has very, very little the compression that we're looking at. It doesn't move, so you can put these products
Right.
Over it. Now, there's a lot of people that put in a 2.5 millimeter cork and they think they're getting a 75, 80 IIC rating.
Right.
No, you're nowhere close to that. But why do you have to go that thick? I mean, a 1/4 inch underlayment, that's going to have a cost to it. And it's going to have a problem opening your doors, your kitchen cupboards, everything. It has to be factored into the job at the beginning. But why would you put, $10 a square foot into your underlayment and $2 a square foot into your floor covering material?
Right. And that's why I just wanted to have that clarification, just to see.
It was merely just an example that I used because there are options out there, but they're very, very expensive.
Gotcha. Yeah. And the only reason why I mentioned that is because I have installed an SPC product over cork. So like I said, I
don't have a problem with that. I think it'll work quite well.
Right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Drew.
Drew, we just have a question from Stefan.
Okay.
Can you see that?
No, do you want to read it out, Lee?
Sure. SPC distributors state various claims in regard to their flooring's performance, i.e. minus 40 C to plus 40 C with no expansion or contraction, or no expansion joints needed for 10,000 feet of single installation, etc. How can an installer or homeowner perform quantitative testing to an industry standard to ensure the flooring will perform in a specific job site condition, i.e. residential or light commercial use?
They can't.
And he's given an example. In the ceramic tile industry, a finished flooring assembly is tested via the Robinson floor test, ATM C627, giving it a duty rating, which can then be practically applied to the use or limitation of the product.
Okay, so they can't. And their product might be different to somebody else's product with the combination of polymers, the amount of stone, the print, the pad. So their product and specifically would have to be tested. So you would have to go to a third-party testing lab, explain the parameters of what you're looking for, and have it tested there. There is no way of doing that on your own. And then the testing lab would have to say, well, how many, we can't just do one board. We can't just test one board and say they're all like that. How many boards do you have to test? And what I find very interesting about testing, and I learned this from Dr. Brian Bond from Virginia Tech University, a man I respect very, very much. He said, when you create a test, you have to create what results you're looking for so you can create the test to get to those results. I'm scratching my head going, well, that's kind of backwards. And it's not, because you can make something pass or fail with whatever test that you come up with. And that's not your objective. So testing is very objective itself. And this is why I respect ASTM when their testing parameters are so specific, where it tells you what color shoelaces to wear when you do the test to make it all even. And we don't have that to the person asking that question. We don't have that in the vinyl world that I'm aware of yet. It's just let it go out there and see what happens. Any other questions?
Drew, yeah, there's one more from Stefan. That was his first question, and the second one, which I almost missed this. He is talking about here, every brand of SPC flooring has its own requirements, often with small nuances or differences which are not found until the fine print is read. not easily or realistically accessible by the common flooring installer. Must installers spend hours reading, understanding, and then knowing how to apply the specific instructions from brand to brand, considering how many there are? And does this not cause an unfair disadvantage to the installer?
Wow, that's a loaded question. So I'm going to answer that twofold. I'm going to say, yes, it's up to the installer to follow manufacturer's instructions, but it's up to the manufacturer to print correct and clear instructions.
And remember that not everybody speaks English as a first language. Quite often it's immigrants are installing floors.
Oh, 100%. Even in the United States too. We have French up here, but outside of Quebec, there's very, very few people that speak French, but it's the law that we have it. In the States, they have a huge Spanish population, but even English as a second language here in Canada, some of these installers are very, very, very good installers. You're right, that can't manipulate English very well, especially when it gets technical. So to answer that fellow's question, I actually like that question very much, because manufacturers' installation instructions are very dear to me. And this is where most of my, almost every inspection comes down to these instructions written wrong, incorrect, or interpreted wrong and incorrectly by the installer. So I think, to answer this fellow's question, there has to be a balance to say the manufacturer has to write the instructions that they want followed, but in a clear, methodical way where it's understood and it's achievable. So there are differences in products. So when there are differences, a lot of manufacturers do use bold print, do highlight it or caption it. They try their best. There's other manufacturers that don't try their best. You can't read them. I mean, they're so fine print because they're trying to get a dictionary of material onto one page. I've actually had to hand it to somebody with a magnifying glass and say, can you read this? That's unfair. I don't like instructions that are written like IKEA's instructions. So when these products, the manufacturer, usually a European manufacturer that wants to sell it in 130 different countries, and they have all pictorials with no print, that's an unfair advantage too, because that's not telling everything that's needed to know about the product. So I think that's a good question. Unfortunately, we're not going to change that because manufacturers can do what they want. I personally, if I owned a store, I would not carry, knowing what I know now, I would not carry any products that do not have a clear instruction sheet behind it, because that just means you're not professional if you don't have clear instructions or maintenance instructions.
Vote with your purchases. Choose what goes into your showroom if you have a showroom.
So I find it interesting that we're selling flooring with poor instructions or one-page instructions, but I would buy something off of Amazon, a Bluetooth or something this big, and the instruction looks like a mini yellow pages when I get it. Well, how come the flooring industry doesn't do that?
Yeah.
There's another manufacturer out there. They're based out of Burnaby, BC, and it's brilliant. They have a QR code on their box. Their instructions are updated all the time, and it's going to be hard fetched to find an installer or an installation crew leader that doesn't have a smartphone.
Are there any industry standards, general standards that bridge the gap between all of these various, like one category of flooring, one industry?
Well, yes and no. So yes, we have industry standards, but if I can go back to wood, because we know about the NWFA being quite the voice in the wood flooring business, everything that they say in their guidelines, they don't have instructions. NWFA has guidelines, not instructions.
Right. And
they say in their guidelines that manufacturer's instructions supersede. But then a guy like myself and any other inspector on this call will come along and go, but your instructions are wrong. So am I allowed to go against their instructions if they're wrong? But it's written right there.
How frustrating is that? That is.
Well, and this is where I get to the legal case on, we get to court, and I'm making this up now. So we get to court and the installer has a lawyer, and the lawyer says, well, what did my client do wrong? He followed these instructions. Yeah, but those instructions are wrong. But my client read them and installed it to that. Yeah, but he shouldn't have. I'm going to lose that one.
Yeah. Okay, John T. Williams, your hands up.
So Drew, so as far as the installation guidelines, a lot of those installation guidelines are actually available online as well. So even if it's not 100% evident on it, like if it's small printed, they have access to go and find the actual correct installation guidelines, as well as contact the technical departments for those certain manufacturers to get any type of information that they actually need.
Yes, that is true. They have that opportunity. But I think the question that came up was, is it unfair and is it realistic when they're not clear and then there's fine print?
Totally.
That was kind of like the question. I took it the step further. I'm
Totally.
going to also suggest to you, a lot of these companies don't have a tech department. They'll claim to have a tech department, but you're just going to go through to talk to some sales supervisor.
Totally.
I don't like when I read in instructions, to learn how to clean our floors and maintain our floors, talk to your retailer, talk to your dealer.
Right.
You think that if I went to all these dealers across Canada, that each and every one of them know how to maintain every floor in their showroom? No, I think that's up to the manufacturer to specify. And it's that the dealer should be able to read the manufacturer's documentation, how to maintain the floor.
I agree.
So a lot of it's controversial, and maybe this is a good topic for a future call, is installation instructions and misinformation on floors.
Yeah. Well,
I've shown Chris many examples of bad instructions or contradicting instructions.
yeah, kept me up at night.
Right.
Well,
which I'm
they'll
sure
have two
it's
different.
true.
They'll have two different nailing schedules or two different fasteners they're allowed, and they'll pick two different spots in there. Well, which one do you pick?
Yeah, terrible.
So
Graham, he says a comment, many manufacturers have technical departments that know the products and are happy to answer questions about the best way to install their products. I mean, that's key. Again, if I'm a dealer and I'm giving up my precious real estate in my showroom, I want to know that the product has support. It's not all.
yeah, well, Graham's right. Some do. And some of my best friends are these tech reps of these big companies. But if we have 5,000 manufacturers and distributors, I'm only going to say 100 of them have a tech rep and a tech department. I know some manufacturers that have an environmental chamber and they use it to do testing, or they do third-party testing. There's other distributors that private label their products, and there's no tech department behind that. Or when I talk to the tech department, I find out who they are, and I'm like, oh boy, you're the marketing department. You're not the tech department.
Exactly.
So Graham's right. Many do, but I'm going to suggest not as many as you think.
Right.
Because they call me, and that's why I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. You can call me, but shouldn't have to if you're the guy. You're the technical director.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I think we've picked your brains for long enough there, Drew. We should let you go and have an evening in Toronto. Thank you so much. It's fantastic information on a very hot topic, and we'll have you back. This is stuff that we don't solve with one session. The beauty of this is we can record it and get it out to as many people as possible.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm going to make another offer to you and the NFCA that if anybody on this call has any questions that come up afterwards, or that we unfortunately didn't get around to due to time restraints, email Chris, and if they can't be answered, Chris will forward them to me, respecting my time, of course. But I want to support the NFCA as much as I can. I thank everybody for attending, and I'm here to help. I'm here to answer any questions if I can. So